Within just 15 minutes, they faced a harsh truth. Titanic was going to sink. April 14, 1912. The night sky was calm. The sea still as if welcoming this grand voyage. Aboard the largest and most luxurious ship ever built, over 2,000 souls were toasting, laughing, and dreaming. No one imagined that in just a few hours, all that luxury would turn into chaos. Hope would become desperate screams. Titanic, the ship declared unsinkable, would become a floating grave for more than 1,000 lives. A night that should never have happened. Yet it was that very night that changed history forever. The early 20th century was an era brimming with hope and faith in human progress. Giant machines were beginning to move the world, and among all that innovation stood the most magnificent symbol of human triumph. RMS Titanic. Built at the Harland and Wolff shipyard in Belfast, Northern Ireland, Titanic was an engineering marvel. It stretched 269 meters long, about 4 football fields, and weighed over 46,000 tons. It wasn't just a ship. Titanic was a floating palace. Inside, first class felt like a different world entirely. Crystal chandeliers, plush carpets, a grand carved staircase, luxurious dining rooms, and even an indoor swimming pool, something unheard of at sea. Billionaires, aristocrats, and celebrities of the time rushed to buy tickets. Titanic was a symbol of status, a symbol of power, and a symbol of hope. But behind all that grandeur was one claim that would become a curse. Titanic was said to be unsinkable. It wasn't just a slogan, it became a kind of spell, lulling many into a false sense of invincibility. Yet that belief was the purest form of human arrogance in the face of nature. Titanic carried only 20 lifeboats, enough for barely half of its passengers. Why? Because they believed they wouldn't be needed. To the engineers, Titanic was too big, too strong, too perfect to fail. But nature knows no perfection. And when humans dare to defy fate, fate often responds in the cruelest of ways. April 9, 1912. Southampton Port, England. Thousands crowded the docks, waving goodbye, sending love, and tucking their hopes inside their suitcases. Titanic, the ship of dreams, was preparing to cross the Atlantic for the first time, and though they didn't know it, last time. On the first-class deck, aristocrats relaxed in wicker chairs, sipping afternoon tea with a view of the open sea. In the ballroom, soft piano melodies danced through the air, accompanied by the laughter of high society. In the lavish dining room, waiters in white vests served 9-course meals, from fresh oysters to filet mignon, paired with the finest wines. But far below, the atmosphere was very different. On the third-class deck, hundreds of immigrants from Ireland, Italy, and Eastern Europe gathered with their families. Their beds were straw-filled. Their meals were plain. But their eyes sparkled with the same dream: a new life in America. A fresh start, far from war, famine, and poverty they had left behind. Children ran through narrow corridors. Mothers held their babies, whispering stories of the adventures awaiting them across the ocean. In every corner of the ship, there were smiles. There were plans. There were promises for tomorrow. No one knew how little time they had. That in just a matter of days, fate would come without mercy. Titanic, so grand, so mighty, gave no sign of the danger that lay ahead. 3 days passed like a dream. Until the 4th night came, and that dream became a nightmare. April 14, 1912, 11:40 p.m. The temperature had dropped drastically. The air was biting and the sea was eerily still. Too still. Titanic sped at full steam across the North Atlantic. Several iceberg warnings had been received throughout the day, but they were largely ignored. After all, what could possibly threaten a ship like Titanic? On deck, only a few passengers remained awake. Most were fast asleep in the warmth of their cabins. Then, without warning, came a metallic scraping sound. Not loud, not dramatic. In fact, it was barely noticeable. Titanic had struck a massive iceberg, nearly invisible in the dark and flat sea. It didn't crash head-on. Instead, the iceberg sliced along the starboard side, tearing through 5 supposedly watertight compartments like a knife through skin. In the engine room, engineers heard cracks and the terrifying rush of water. They knew this was a catastrophe. On the bridge, officers assessed the damage. Within just 15 minutes, they faced a harsh truth. Titanic was going to sink. But on the passenger decks, calm still lingered. Most people had no idea what had happened. Some stepped out in their robes, wondering why the engines had stopped. There were no panicked announcements, no alarms. Some even thought it was just a minor delay. But seawater was rising, slowly, relentlessly. In the lower decks, immigrants began to feel cold water seeping into narrow corridors. They rushed upward, but not all stairways were open. They got lost, and time kept ticking. Above, crew members began lowering lifeboats, but many passengers refused to board, unable to believe that a ship this massive could sink. They didn't know that at that very moment, time had already run out. The black ocean stretched endlessly. The air was so cold it could pierce through bone. On Titanic's deck, the atmosphere shifted, from curiosity to panic. Lifeboats were lowered one by one, but there were far too few. Titanic carried only 20 lifeboats, enough to save about 1,200 people out of the more than 2,200 on board. And even as the first boats were launched, they were only half full. Crew shouted orders, but many were unprepared for the chaos. Women and children first. But who decides who deserves to live? On the first-class deck, passengers were given direct access to the lifeboats. They wore fur coats, carried small bags filled with jewelry, still believing this was just a precaution. Meanwhile, on the third-class deck, hundreds were confused. Some were locked behind lower corridors, waiting for crew who never returned. Many didn't speak English. Others panicked, shouting, trying to find a way up. But it was already too late. At the railings, children's cries echoed. Mothers pleaded for their babies to be saved first. Husbands stood silently watching their wives from afar, knowing they wouldn't be joining that boat. Some first-class men disguised themselves as women. Others bribed the crew. Chaos and fear became one. Yet amid the horror, stories of bravery emerged. Titanic's musicians kept playing, hoping to calm the passengers. A priest led prayers for those who knew they wouldn't survive. Crew members stayed at their posts, doing what they could to delay the inevitable. But the sea would not be delayed. As the bow of the ship dipped into the water, screams tore through the night sky. Cries for help, sobbing, the groaning sound of steel ripping apart. And then, one by one, those voices disappeared, swallowed by the cold, dark Atlantic. "2:20 a.m., April 15, 1912. Titanic was officially gone. The majestic ship once deemed unsinkable slipped beneath the surface of the Atlantic, taking over 1,500 lives with her. The sea became a silent witness. There were no floating wrecks, no final warning. Only hearts that stopped beating, and an ocean that returned to calm as if nothing had happened. But the world was never the same. The Titanic tragedy shook humanity. Investigations were launched in both Britain and the United States. Startling facts emerged. An insufficient number of lifeboats, chaotic evacuation procedures, and mankind's arrogance toward technology. From the ruins rose sweeping change. The International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea was established in 1914. New rules were implemented. Every ship must carry enough lifeboats for all passengers. Radio communication must be manned 24/7, and regular evacuation drills became mandatory. But Titanic's legacy is more than regulations. It is a deeply human symbol. decades passed. Then in 1985, the wreck of Titanic was finally discovered, resting over 3,800 meters deep in the North Atlantic. Underwater cameras captured haunting images. The grand staircase collapsed, dining plates still in place, a child's shoes lying in the muddy seabed. Silent, still, but more powerful than words. Titanic is not just a ship. She is a mass grave. A resting place where thousands of dreams remain buried with cold steel and history that refuses to fade. More than a century later, the story of Titanic still echoes in our hearts. It reminds us of pride and fragility, of love and loss, and of one simple truth. Even the unsinkable can vanish in a single night. Titanic sank, but her story never did. That night, the sea didn't just swallow a ship. It drowned dreams, love, and humanity's faith in perfection. Titanic has long been lost to the depths of the ocean. But the question still echoes to this day. If you were on that ship that night, would you have survived? Or become part of a story that was never fully told? If this story touched you, don't forget to hit the like button and share your thoughts or feelings in the comments below, which, like the ocean, are just as mysterious and moving, because the past always has a voice, and we are here to listen. Thank you for watching. Remember, every shot tells a story worth remembering. Subscribe, and see you in the next One Shot History.